of you might be familiar with the Zeitgeist Movement. It's a grassroots initiative that's widely regarded as one of the most transformative social movements on the planet. Well, over the weekend, the global community of activists attended the 6th annual Zeitgeist Day, or ZDay, with its main event hosted at the University of Toronto. ZDay provides a platform for thousands of people around the world to discuss some of the most important issues facing global society. And while specific discussions change every year, the end goal remains the same: shifting public consciousness to embrace and enact paradigm-shifting solutions. Earlier today, I was joined by McLeish, a speaker at ZDay 2014 and contributor to a new book titled The Zeitgeist Movement Defined. I first asked Ben how the movement has evolved since its first ZDay.
It's been a very organic transition as people have started to hear about it more. So we've certainly seen a groundswell in membership, different diverse people from different backgrounds, not just what you would call the traditional activist types. And we've also seen a fair amount of buy-in from what you term famous people, people who have kind of celebrity who are interested in positively affecting the world. And
you were giving a talk at this year's event about paradigm shifts, Ben. Can you expand on the notion that we are in the midst of a new emerging social paradigm?
Yes, paradigms are very powerful precisely because they are an interlocking set of ideas that seem to support themselves. They always claim that they refer to science and the real world and the way things really are. You can see quite clearly how ridiculous this is when you go back and see that we used to believe in tooth worms for almost 4,000 years with no physical evidence whatsoever. Or the divine right of kings, back when we thought that kingship needed to be justified that way. All of these things are always claimed to be absolutely natural. The paradigm we find ourselves in now is probably the most dangerous one because it's certainly a mode of behavior on the planet that doesn't take into account at all the resources that are actually there. We assume that it's completely infinite. And we're still very much on a centralized ownership and control-based model when really decentralized and open and available models are really what we're transitioning towards, and which are the most stable, the most sustainable, and include, by definition, the most people possible.
I've discussed the Zeitgeist Movement before with its founder, Peter Joseph, on this show, but can you describe really briefly for our audience what a resource-based economy is? And you're talking about the transition and the importance of one. How can we transition from this paradigm into a resource-based economy?
Sure. So a resource-based economy, quite simply, is an economy that explicitly uses the best in science and technology for the welfare and concern of humanity and the biosphere. It's a remarkable fact that the modern paradigm, whatever you want to call it, whether you want to use the snarl word capitalism or anything else, simply doesn't take this stuff into account. So it's a deliberate worldwide understanding of our interconnected nature on this planet, the fact that we do have a planet to live on, and it is, for all intents and purposes, a closed system that we have to maximize in, and we have to really look after the resources. Now, that includes things like replenishment rates, it includes basic human needs being serviced and looked after and served in general by the society. And the only way to really do that, to follow real efficiency rather than the sort of market efficiency of profit maximization that we see at the moment, is ultimately in the most important sense, going to yield a moneyless society once we really get to functional utility of things. So that's the general overview of it. To get there, well, you can't do it without education. You can't do this to a room full of blank stares and minds that have not been organized to understand what is actually important in life, why we do actually prefer science and technology in, it seems, everything except things like religion and economics. These things seem to be somehow not in line with it.
You're talking about open source technology, things like that. You've cited Wikipedia in the past as an example of what humans can accomplish when information is free. But even Wikipedia is governed by mob rule. So who would make the decisions in a resource-based economy?
It's not so much that we want to make decisions, it's that these decisions become arrived at. There's actually a very decent writer called Clay Shirky who wrote a very good book called Here Comes Everybody that describes organization without organizations and describes how essentially as a matter of creating a decentralized open source and available system for anybody who wants to participate, you can mass organize information and create byproducts that essentially don't mean that you have to put anything to a vote. It's a sort of a byproduct of the system itself, the integrity and the correlation of each individual to the other, and the availability of information on a mass scale that actually allows you to arrive at decisions very quickly. We do this now. I mean, nobody sits and tries to work out where the bandwidth of the internet should go tomorrow. It's something that through load balancing and intelligent feedback systems and almost approaching the sort of neural network idea of artificial intelligence is something that is essentially produced out of the system functioning correctly.
I just wanted to get this out of the way. For those who think that the Zeitgeist movement is Marx's ideal, is the utopia of Marxism, can you explain why it's not?
Sure. The end goal of the Zeitgeist movement is not to exist anymore. We want to create a world that no longer requires the basic advocation and the delivery of understandings of why science and technology form the cornerstone of anything that's good about your life and about the life around you. And this has not been the case with any of the sort of so-called political movements of the past that want to see sort of a 1,000-year rule or any kind of permanent installation of their particular ideologies. We don't peddle in ideologies at all. We peddle in rationality and wanting people to finally think for themselves and not immediately knee-jerk and say, well, who do I vote for to get this in? You can't vote for anybody. There's no person that will do this for you. This is the byproduct of you understanding that the idea of voting for a human or a set of humans amid a systems-governed world is itself an act of irrationality, is itself corruption.
Ben, you collaborated on a book that just came out called The Zeitgeist Movement Defined. It's also available as an ebook. Can you talk about what the book is all about?
Sure, I've got a copy of it here. What we did, it was after many years of requests, is that we've spent the best part of about 3 years really compiling the front-to-back train of thought from where we are now presently with economics, what actually is important, the various understandings of things like systems theory, and again, we talk about paradigms a lot, all the way through to the fundamental building blocks of how one might approach building a society on the planet that really is in line with the natural world that we see and that would maximize not just the biosphere, not just humanity, but indeed both. And we put that all together in an extended set of essays, fully referenced. Many hundreds of sources are in there. So if anybody is finding themselves blankly staring at the screen, not really understanding what I'm saying, our book is available completely for free on our website, or there's an at-cost available order from things like Amazon and Lulu.
Thank you so much, Ben McLeish, speaker, Zeitgeist Movement. Really appreciate you coming on. That's our show, you guys. Good night.